conspiracies, the kinds of things that we heard at the driveway.
This is the New Negro Podcast. How you doing?
But it bore no relationship to what we were actually sitting there doing in court. And so I listened for a while, and I realized that I had to do two things. One was to deal with rather outrageous statements that he was making throughout his presentation. The other was then to focus the court on what we were really there for. Because when you look at the complaint and what was really involved in this case, it was a bunch of small ball complaints that various administrators didn't do some things correctly. Yeah. When we think the administrators were doing the very best they could to run a fair and honest election.
To that, Giuliani made some remarkable claims. I mean, he accused Philadelphia election workers of being a little mafia group. I mean, can you make accusations like that in a court of law without basis?
No, you really can't. And I wasn't going to sit there and let that go. I represent the government and all the aspects that are making these elections work right for all Americans, and particularly for Pennsylvanians. And these are patriots. These are public servants. These are people who, in the middle of a pandemic, went out there day after day and sometimes all night trying to get this election moving and right for the American people. An election that had the biggest turnout in Pennsylvania's history and probably in the United States history. And so to sit there and see these sideswipes and these outrageous accusations, a little mafia, gigantic conspiracies among all the big cities. He'll show this conspiracy if he only has another chance to amend his complaint, and he can start again and have a hearing. He was living in his own fantasy, but he wasn't living in the reality of this court case. That's how I saw it.
Now, reality did eventually intervene, did it not? Because you say that Giuliani eventually conceded that the case wasn't about fraud or widespread fraud. How exactly did he make that concession?
Well, here's the greatness.
This is the New Negro Podcast. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you guys for listening in. I appreciate you being here.
You can say all kinds of things on Twitter and in parking lot driveways and the like. But when you go into an American courtroom, you have to have evidence, facts. You have to make legal arguments that are appropriate. And when all was said and done, the judge, it was a very good judge.
Are we going to war? Are we going to war is what we want to get to. Are we going to go to war? Is this man going to take his last few minutes and send America to war? I would not put it past. He's bringing back, he's firing, he's amping up his little area to send USA into war against Iran. Could this happen? Listen. I'm sorry about that.
Just asked. You keep talking about fraud, but I don't see this in the complaint. And eventually, Mr. Giuliani said, you're right. We don't have fraud in the complaint. We're not talking about fraud. And I've seen this now several times where the campaign comes in with big accusations about fraud and then retreats under pressure from judges to explain themselves and tell the American public what they're talking about.
So where does that leave big picture? And I know you're party just to the case in Pennsylvania, but you have enormous experience in these kinds of cases. Where does that leave this legal challenge that the president is still talking and tweeting about this morning?
Well, let me just give a word about Pennsylvania, because in the middle of yesterday's federal court hearing, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, in another case of mine, issued a very important ruling saying that all these accusations about whether observers of the campaign had meaningful access to watch the counting and watch the administration of the mail-in ballots, the Supreme Court said yes, they did. Under the law, they, as well as all campaigns, had access. They were observers in the way that the election code expects. And so in the middle of the argument in federal court about these broad, wild accusations, our Pennsylvania Supreme Court reaffirmed another principle that tells us all that this election was run very well, with all of the challenges, with all of the pandemic issues and the mail-in system. It was run very well. And so I'm not going to get ahead of where the judge yesterday is. I will never do that, but I hope that we prevail. I think we will prevail. And I just think these cases and these accusations are going to run their course. And we're going to get on with what we should be involved in, and that is certifying these elections and then moving on.
Yeah.
Well, listen, facts matter in court. Mark Aronchik, we appreciate your view from the inside.
I thank you very much, Jim.
So, what's your friend's birthday?
Me personally, I'm getting tired of hearing this crybaby. I'd rather, we go ahead and just send him on and let him go on about what he got to do, because aren't you getting tired of hearing them too? Just wham, 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 wham. That's all we hear about. But like I said, though, let me show you something here. So it looks like we might have a stimulus package on its way. Let me show you something here. And then later on, we're going to get into some talks about the killings that's been going on with rap. Mo3, King Von, and all these individuals. I think this is funny, but there's about to be a war going on here. A war that's going to be coming real soon, guys. All right, hold up here. This is the New Negro Podcast. Thank you for listening. Hold up here. All right. Here we go.
Good to be here with you. So 4 years ago, President Trump ran on a promise to put a stop to America's endless wars. Today, it's just announced at the Pentagon, President Trump is keeping that promise to the American people. President Trump understood that the way to end those wars was to adopt a peace through strength approach to the world. He rebuilt the American military, which had been decimated by defense sequestration under the Obama administration. He required our allies to step up their game. And America's NATO allies are now spending $400 billion in additional defense spending over the next 10 years. And they've contributed more troops to conflict zones in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. I just finished a phone call with Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg of NATO, and we discussed regional issues. And I thanked him for the alliance's continued contributions to the West's national security and to freedom and security in our overseas missions in countries like Iraq and Afghanistan. President Trump empowered our great armed forces to defeat 100% of the ISIS caliphate. That caliphate was the size of Great Britain, stretching across Syria and Iraq when President Trump took office. And he authorized the daring nighttime raid that brought justice to the founder and cruel leader of ISIS, Bakr Abu al-Baghdadi. Under President Trump, the U.S. military and intelligence services have wiped out most of the Al-Qaeda leadership, striking that organization which perpetrated 9/11 in Mali, Yemen, Afghanistan, Syria, and other locales. President Trump's resolve and America's strength has also led to peace in the Middle East. From the historic Abraham Accords to the peace deal with the Taliban that has led to inter-Afghan negotiations, the world is safer because of the Trump administration's policies. Moments ago, Acting Secretary of Defense Miller announced major troop reductions in Afghanistan and in Iraq. Effective January 15, 2021, American troops in both countries will go to 2,500 personnel. Those troops will defend our embassies and the other agencies of the U.S. government doing important work in those countries. They'll enable our American allies in their important missions in those countries. They'll defend our diplomats, and they'll deter our foes. By May, it is President Trump's hope that they will all come home safely and in their entirety. I want to reiterate that this policy is not new. This has been the president's policy since he took office, and it's a policy that I talked about specifically with these numbers at the University of Las Vegas, University of Nevada, Las Vegas in October. So it's appropriate at this time to again thank our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marine, and Coast Guardsmen, and especially their families, and especially those families of our fallen heroes and of our wounded warriors. They've made tremendous sacrifices for the fight against terrorism and to keep our country secure. They're simply the best men and women this country has to offer. Critics have said that the president would not be able to rebuild our military, strengthen our alliances, wreak havoc on the terrorists, bring peace to the Middle East, and end our forever wars. Yet he has done that and positioned us to win the coming great power competition. Any one of these achievements would merit tremendous praise.
Right on this dick, then.
Taken together, President Trump's foreign policy and national security record is comparable only to Ronald Reagan to past two generations. Thank you all. God bless our men and women in uniform, and God bless this great nation. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Thank you very much.
No, we're not supporting none of that shit. Not supporting none of that shit. I don't want nothing to do with none of that shit at all.
The biggest stories the moment they happen from Boomer Quick Take now for insight in an instant.
So those of y'all that's still listening, thank you very much. I do appreciate it. Please put your like and send this out there as much as you can. Here's another.
The one-time card is like an ex-boyfriend. You use it to get what you want, and you bounce. There's no contract, no interest, and no strings attached. Mermaid now, pay later. At Fingerhut, we don't define you by your credit score, so we offer low monthly payments on things you need and brands you trust as you build your credit history with a Fingerhut credit account. You do you at Fingerhut.com.
Fingerhut credit accounts are issued by WebBank or FDIC.
All right, let's get to it.
Good afternoon. I'm Chris Miller, Acting Secretary of Defense, and I'm here today to update you on President Trump's plan to bring the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq to a successful and responsible conclusion, and to bring our brave service members home. From Kabul to Kandahar, and from Mosul to Fallujah, hundreds of thousands of America's finest sons and daughters who selflessly answered the call to serve in the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard have brought us to this point. Their efforts and sacrifice will go down in history as epitomizing the strength, commitment, and empathy of a force that is unlike any the world has ever seen. Just last night, I joined Vice President Mike Pence and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Milley, to attend the dignified transfer of 5 American soldiers who perished on duty in the Middle East. This was a somber and humbling moment that reminded us of the tremendous sacrifices made by the men and women of the United States military in service of freedom and security. Our armed forces take an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. They serve not for personal gain, but for the protection and well-being of their fellow Americans and their homeland. They are champions for peace, liberty, and the rule of law, and unrelenting when called upon to defend our people and our values. We owe them and their loved ones an enormous debt of gratitude. This is why I'm enormously blessed and privileged to stand before you today to outline the next phase of our campaign to defeat terrorists who have perpetrated attacks on our homeland, including those who help and harbor them, and to prevent future acts of terrorism against our nation. We owe this moment to the many patriots who made the ultimate sacrifice and their comrades who carry forward their legacy. Together, we have mourned the loss of more than 6,900 American troops who gave their lives in Afghanistan and Iraq, and we will never forget the more than 52,000 who bear the wounds of war and all those who still carry its scars, visible and invisible. In light of these tremendous sacrifices, and with great humility and gratitude to those who came before us, I am formally announcing that we will implement President Trump's orders to continue our repositioning of forces from those two countries. By January 15th, 2001, I clearly am thinking of where this started in 2001. By January 15th, 2021, our forces, their size in Afghanistan, will be 2,500 troops. Our force size in Iraq will also be 2,500 by that same date. This is consistent with our established plans and strategic objectives, supported by the American people, and does not equate to a change.
So I get tired of hearing that bullshit. It's the same old bullshit. Same old bullshit. He's got a new person up in here. It's just, I can't wait till America gets back to being America. But I want something you guys to listen to. Mo3's manager. Mo3's manager. Listen up here, guys. Believe it or not, Mo3 just got killed the other day ago, and this is important.
I get my car, I pat him down. This girl was driving me around, she kept playing this dude singing these slow songs. I'm like, bro, this nigga hard. I'm like, how do you know him? She's like, that's Mo3. I'm like, for real? I said, yeah, that's Mo3. I said, give me a number. It was 6 o'clock, I had to go back home because I was on 8 months. I'm at my mama's house in her den. I'm like, hey, bro, so I'm like, I'm Ryan Moore. He's like, yeah. I'm like, I know you don't know me, but I can make you rich. Like, for real? I'm like, bro, I can make you $10,000 show. He's like, for real? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, bro, you like the next Kurt Cobain. He was like, oh, but you know I rap. I said, man, fuck all that rap shit, bro. You was a Kurt Cobain. You got all these girls listen to you. To not rap, we'll listen to Hold Your Tongue. I listen to that bitch. I remember my mom did. I listen to that bitch. I said, damn, that nigga hard. I called him and I said, nah, bro, you go hard. He said, I told you. So I like, look, when I'm on house arrest, I'm going to pick you up tomorrow. We go to the studio. So we go. I pick him up. I'm walking downstairs. Got this big old thing sticking out of his pocket. I like, nah, I'm on parole, bro. You can't do it like this. So to this day, every time you get in my car, I pat him down. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? I pat him down. You know what I'm saying? We go to the studio. I mean, he just started rapping fast. Man, Lord, bro. I'm like, bro, what you got going on? Man, I'm barely sleep. I ain't got nowhere to stay this next. I'm like, bro, I ain't got nowhere to stay. Why nobody ever mess with him? Like, ain't nobody ever believe in me. I'm like, for real? Ain't nobody ever believe in me. I don't push your music. I go to the club, and by then, all the other Dallas rappers, they was kind of on. I mean, they was known. Nobody knew who he was. Like, man, this nigga speaking in the car. He's calling my phone. Bro, why he telling people I ain't got no money? I'm speaking in the car. Like, bro, it go add up after a while. Now he start rapping about it. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? I'm like, he was humble too at first. You know what I'm saying? He said first. No, I'm just talking about the beginning. Like, he was humble too. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, if he got a verse or something like that, then he was like, shit, we split that. You know what I'm saying? We split that. Like, you know what I'm saying? So shit, I made it my dues, my job, go out, make as much money, we do studio time, we do whatever we can take. You know what I'm saying?
Man, I was gonna say, at this point, how long has that relationship been?
About 4 years.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a pretty solid situation, man. Y'all been going. So throughout this journey, man, I've seen you visit record labels after record label. Like, what would it take for y'all to actually sign these records?
I believe Free is like a booster, a guy. He took out them a long time, but when they did sign that deal, they were on top. You know what I'm saying? Gotti say all the time like how long it took. So I believe deep down inside, you know what I'm saying? When he do sign a deal, he got so much history behind him that whatever we ask for, they gonna come and give it to us. Because we did you know what I'm saying? Like, a rapper's not longevity unless they build a foundation. I see a lot of rappers skip that foundation, go straight to the top, then come back to the bottom, try to build a foundation. And once you try to come back and try to build a foundation, you already sunk.